Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today we are going through poems. Everybody's going to be reading their favorite poems. Then we're going to have a very special activity in the breakout rooms, which Maritza will talk about a little bit later. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about poetry, what it does for us, all kinds of questions that we can come up with. All right, so it's going to be 3 different sections with completely different characters. We're going to start with the featured poem, and over to you, Maritza.
All right, so today's featured poem is titled Bluebird by Charles Bukowski. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke. And the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? You want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes when everybody's asleep. I say, I know you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And we sleep together like that with our secret pact. And it's nice enough to make a man weep. But I don't weep. Do you? So I love this poem. I think it's both beautiful and heart-achingly sad. And I think that at some point in our lives, all of us have a bluebird in our heart that wants to get out and that we're beaten down into submission so that nobody can see. I just think it's a beautiful metaphor for some of those things that weigh heavily in one's heart. It's one of my favorites. Although I have to stop saying that. I guess if every poem I read, I say is my favorite, takes away from the definition of favorite, huh? But yes, this one, this song brings to mind the struggle of how we have to balance the things we keep near and dear so that we can function and letting it out a little bit. You know, you can't, like all things in moderation, as it were. Gotta let the emotions out sometimes. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's a beautiful poem. Thank you. All right, folks. So now it's time for people to read their own favorite poems. So go ahead. You're welcome to share your own poem or any poem that you like. Go ahead and type exclamation mark. If you'd like to share a poem, I encourage everybody to share poems, but you don't have to. All right, it's completely up to you. And we'll go from there. So we'll listen to all the poems, and after you read your poem, you can talk for a few minutes, about maybe 2-3 minutes, about what you like about it, what really stands out for you, and then we'll go to the next person. We're going to start.
One really quick thing before we start. I do want to say, if you are reading a personal poem, I will reach out to you in private message and ask if it's okay to take your poem and write it down. What I do is I will create it into a document and a hyperlink so that we can share it in the hyperbook. So if you do have a personal poem, I will personally seek to see if you'll let me include it in our group thing, because I am collecting the names and titles of all the poems, and I'll provide a link for you.
Wonderful. Let's start with D, Brian, and Joe. D, go ahead. David. D, you need to unmute.
I was trying to decide what to read, but I thought I'd make it easy. You know, one reason I'm here is the mention of the name Bukowski. And I like Bukowski. And so I'd like to read a poem by him. One thing about Bukowski, he goes inside a lot. He kind of goes deep inside in the way that sometimes I do and many people. You saw it in the Bluebird poem. It's about being inside. And so he has a cat. I have a cat. You might notice I have a cat. The title of this poem is The History of a Tough Motherfucker. He came to the door one night, wet and thin and beaten and terrorized, a white, cross-eyed, tailless cat. I took him in and fed him, and he stayed. He grew to trust me until a friend drove up the driveway and ran him over. I took what was left to a vet who said, well, not much chance. Give him these pills. His backbone is crushed, but it was crushed before and somehow mended. If he lives, he'll never walk. Look at these x-rays. He's been shot. Look here, the pellets are still there. Also, he once had a tail. Somebody cut it off. I took the cat back. It was a hot summer, one of the hottest in decades. I put him on the bathroom floor, gave him water and pills. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't touch the water. I dipped my finger into it and wet his mouth and talked to him. I didn't go anywhere. I put in a lot of bathroom time and talked to him and gently touched him. And he looked back at me with those pale blue crossed eyes. And as the days went by, he made his first move, dragging himself forward by his front legs because the rear legs wouldn't work. He made it to the litter box, crawled over and in. It was like the trumpet of possible victory blowing in that bathroom and into the city. I related to that cat. I've had it bad, not that bad, but bad enough. One morning he got up and stood up and fell back down and just looked at me. You can make it, I said to him. He kept trying, getting up and falling down. Finally, he walked a few steps. He was like a drunk. The real legs just didn't want to do it, and he fell again and rested. Then he got up. You know the rest. Now he's better than ever. Cross-eyed, almost toothless, but the grace is back. And that look in his eyes never left. And now sometimes I'm interviewed. They want to hear about life and literature, and I get drunk. And I hold up my cross-eyed, shot, run over, detailed cat, and I say, look at this. But they don't understand. They say something like, you say you've been influenced by Celine? No, and I hold the cat up. By what happens? By things like this, by this, by this. He holds up the cat. Cat. I shake the cat and hold him up. The smoky and drunken light, he's relaxed, he knows. And then that the interviews end, although I am proud sometimes when I see the pictures later, and there I am, and there's the cat, and we are photographed together. He too knows it's bullshit, but that somehow it all helps. Beautiful. So that's Bukowski. That's from his book, War All the Time. Yeah, I think if you grew up in the Bronx, if you grew up where people get shot, it has some appeal. Maybe if you've been to war, it has some appeal. You know, being a survivor. It's very important to be a survivor and get by everything. Keep on purring. You know, you want to keep on purring.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, David. Next up is Brian, followed by Joe. Brian.
Okay, this one is called Lost Daughters. I never saw you looking so sad, still feeling the pain. It hurt you so. I felt I could not help, but I knew you had nowhere else to go. Only 16, finding your wings. I wanted you to come live with me. My house was so full then, and your mother would not set you free. She told me once, when she took you away, that the easiest thing for her would be to let you both go, release the hold. Then you could come live with me. It was bluebell season in the woods. We had come so many times before. This time was different for both of us. We both felt our worlds hitting the floor. The dark blue contrasted by the yellow of the stamens created such a hue. I wanted my life to be mellow, but I needed your sister and you. Bluebells and the black heart. I could see there was no way. So I took you home back to your mum. It was wrong. I prayed you would not stay. But there for a while, till university called. After graduation, you longed to get away. A planned working trip to Australia. Good luck and enjoy, was all I could say. That's where you met that Canadian man. That's where you mapped out your life. I'm happy for you and your family of 4, but I think of bluebells, never the strife. Darkest blue, stains of yellow, on the stalk of the deepest green. Every spring I remember that day, though not the best day I have ever seen. That prize goes to the night on the ward. After we had waited 9 months long, we were rewarded with a beautiful girl, a bluebell in your hand, on your lips, a song. That's it.
Thank you, Brian. Would you like to say a couple of sentences about it?
Yeah, it's basically, it's a memoir. It's about my oldest daughter, and she had a lot of trouble with her mother. This was after our marriage breakup, and she wanted to meet me privately somewhere and to talk about it. And it was some woods that we used to walk in when they were both children, and that's what the poem is about the bluebell woods.
Wow. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Next up is Joe, followed by Mike. Joe.
So I selected Success is Counted Sweetest by Emily Dickinson. So success is counted sweetest by those who near succeed. To comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. Not one of all the purple host who took the flag today can tell the definition so clear of victory, as he defeated, dying on whose forbidden year the distant strains of triumph burst agonized and clear. So yeah, this one is about essentially, appreciating those who appreciate success or those who have failed. And they appreciate success even more than those individuals that have succeeded themselves. I found that to be profound, because I have a neighbor actually that tried to start a business and failed. And he always talks about his appreciation for people that have succeeded. He has no resentment. And it's a very important thing that he's actually demonstrating to me, in addition to having failed in an appreciation, but he's appreciates what people that have succeeded as opposed to resenting them. And that is an important lesson, because a lot of times people will resent those who have succeeded. They may make excuses and say, well, things went their way, or anything. His business was essentially a victim of bad timing, nothing more. It was a very good idea. In fact, somebody else was able to capitalize on what he had done a year later, 2 years later. But again, I think it's this idea that it's not resenting, it's appreciating those who have taken the risks. And you can apply that to any point of life. She uses the metaphor of a soldier. A soldier that is in victory can't appreciate the one as much as one is that is dying, what victory actually means. So it's this paradox that exists. So I found it very, very powerful poem that we can apply to every aspect of life. I find it too, for me, you know, I have appreciation for a lot of people's gifts as well. So sometimes I feel like I appreciate their gifts more than they do. So, and I think that's true many times, that we even look at, if we look at the best individuals in their fields, sometimes that what they may take for granted, what their abilities or what the gifts they have. So I like this poem a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. For those folks who have just come in, what we're doing is that we are reading poems which really speak to us. You're welcome to read a poem that you like, or you can read one of your own poems. And after you read the poem, you're welcome to talk about it for about 2 to 3 minutes of what you like about the poem and how it speaks to you. Go ahead and type exclamation mark in the chat in order to line up to read your poems. Next up is going to be Mike, Kevin, and Steve. Mike.
I also picked a poem by Bukowski. When I read the recommended poem for this week, I felt sort of a dark undercurrent along with some kind of raw opening up by him. And he's all new to me. And I read a poem of his today in the library that gave me the same feeling. It's called Funhouse. I drive to the beach at night in the winter and sit and look at the burned down amusement pier. Wonder why they just let it sit there in the water. I want it out of there, blown up, vanished, erased. That pier should no longer sit there with madmen sleeping inside. The burned out guts of the funhouse. It's awful, I say. Blow the damn thing up. Get it out of my eyes. That tombstone in the sea. The madmen can find other holes to crawl into. I used to walk that pier when I was 8 years old. And when I read that, I said, first of all, why is he going out of the way to go there in the winter by the sea? It's probably cold and the amusement park is no longer there. And he's talking from this point in his life, at least that's what I got from it, that ends with the 8-year-old in him, which I would imagine at 8 years old, he kept that amusement park as sacred, as I did as a kid. I remember going to an amusement park here in New York called Playland, and my dad would drive us there, and we never went anywhere in the car. So when we were in the car, chances are we were going to Playland once or twice a year, but I never wanted to admit that. I just waited to see the sign leading to the amusement park. And much like in this poem, it came to life. And there's a famous roller coaster there called the Dragon Coaster, which at 8 years old, I wasn't allowed to get on because I wasn't tall enough. And when you pass that roller coaster, there was like a mannequin, the correct height you would have to be to get on that roller coaster. And it was of a boy with a cap. And I would pass that boy and leer at it when I was 7 and 8, because I was getting closer and closer to the right height. And the day that I finally got on, that roller coaster really only had one drop that made it, well, it was made of wood and rickety. That was part of its allure. But the main thing was a drop that came very early. But to get to the drop, you first had to ascend. And to ascend on the roller coaster, it had gears that would take you up, and it would click and click and click, and you're holding on to the rail. And if you look to your left as you were rising, you could see that drop, which was probably around 70 feet. For my 8 or 9-year-old mind, it was 1,000 feet down. And you would finally get to the top and make this ferocious turn and hit that bottom. Bless you, Shrikant. And when I read this poem, it kind of reminded me so much of what it was like to be a kid, that if I were an older man looking at Playland, which was by the sea, by the way, run down and ruined, I would want it to disappear too, because it didn't look like what it looked like to me at 8 years old. So when I read this, I said, wow, man, this guy really caught something there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be Kevin, Steve, Alicia, and Faizan. Kevin.
Thank you, Frank. I just pre-post in case you guys need to read. And this is Chinese called Zi Gui. It's a tradition of education, how to be a good person, and guidelines for living in harmony with others. It's a name in English here translated standards for being good pupil and child. I'm directly reading the chapter 5, which I post. It's in Chinese, it's about 3 line half. Then in English, about 11. Try. I like a translation also, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings, regardless of nationality, race, or religion, everyone should be loved equally. We are all sheltered by the same sky, and we all live on the same planet, Earth. People with high conduct naturally have high reputations. What people value is not high looks. People with great ability naturally have great fame. What people respect is not great words. If you have ability, don't be selfish with it. If other people have an ability, don't lightly denigrate them. Don't toady to the rich. Don't be arrogant to the poor. Don't despise the old. Don't favor the new. If people don't have time, don't bother them with things. If people are not at peace, don't bother them with words. When people have shortcomings, definitely don't publicize them. When people have secrets, definitely don't tell them. Speaking of others' good deeds is itself is good deed. When others learn of it, they become more encouraged. Publicizing other people's shortcomings is in itself evil. People hate it very much, and troubles arise. Admonishing each other to do good builds up both parties' virtue. Not dissuading the other person from doing wrong damage both parties' character. When taking and giving, making the terms clear is most important. Better to give more and take less. When about to do unto others, first ask yourself. If you don't want to do it yourself, then stop immediately. One wants to repay kindness and forget grudging. Repaying grudging is short. Repaying kindness is long. In dealing with maids and servants, one is of a high station, though of a high station, one must be kind and forgiving. Using force to make people submit doesn't make their hearts submit. Only use reason to make people submit will cause there to be no mutterings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Really, really appreciate that. It's wonderful to see poems from different culture. They have very different sensibilities. So wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to, if you don't mind, share actually original plan of the first capture me after 20 years, 30 years away. I thought, oh, in child, we just passively learn from the tradition, some idiom. But here, chapter first, the first couple sentence, 父母呼应物化. When my parents call me, I must answer right away. I'm going to start here right. These days, it's a different story. our kids are solved with electronics device, and we have few kids. It's hard to answer. It's really to, you know, it's talking so difficult like these days. That's the first. When parents can call me, I must answer right away. Ask me doing something, must not be lazy to do it. That's the old tradition. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next up is going to be Steve, followed by Alicia. Steve.
This poem is called The Weighing by Jane Hirschfield. The heart's reasons seen clearly, even the hardest will carry its whip marks and sadness and must be forgiven. As the drought-starved eland forgives the drought-starved lion who finally takes her, enters willingly, then the life she cannot refuse, and his lion is fed and does not remember the other. So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. Then it asks more, and we give it. I found the poem very inspirational and encouraging, that whatever the world asks of us, we have the strength to deal with it and to give our strength. And even if we have to dig deep and ask for more, you know, we're asked of more, we can still find the strength within us to, you know, answer that calling. And even, as she says, even, you know, the few joys that we could remember in our lives, you know, happiness that we experienced at certain ages of our life, that balances any hardships that we may have also experienced during our lifetime. And then the part about the eland and lion I found touching, that the eland has to give her life, and enters willingly, that the lion must be fed, and that cycle, that cycle of death. So I found the poem very inspirational and encouraging. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Alicia, followed by Faizan. Alicia.
Unmute. Okay, perfect. I just found this poem today, so I'm still trying to grasp an understanding for it. But it is, I believe, poems by Richard Sikin. It's titled Crush. Well, this one's titled Seaside Improvisation within the novel or anthology Crush. I take off my hands and I give them to you, but you don't want them. So I take them back and put them on the wrong way, the wrong wrist. The yard is dark. The tomatoes are next to the whitewashed wall. The book on the table is about Spain. The windows are painted shut. Tonight you're thinking of cities under crowns of snow, and I stare at you like I'm looking through a window, counting birds. You wanted happiness. I can't blame you for that. And maybe a mouth sounds idiotic when it blathers on about joy, but tell me, you love this. Tell me you're not miserable. You do the math, you expect the trouble. the seaside town, the electric fence. Draw a circle with a piece of chalk. Imagine standing in a constant cone of light. Imagine surrender. Imagine being useless. A stone on the path means the tea's not ready. A stone in the hand means somebody's angry. The stone inside you still hasn't hit bottom. Yeah, I am still trying to understand what he's getting at in this poem, but what I've gotten so far is that it's about this slow, like, de-evolution of a relationship, wherein with somebody's giving their all for just anything in response to the other person, him giving up his hands and his partner not even accepting them, and he doesn't even know what to do with his hands at this point because he's been rejected. And just him being content with what they have, with him just looking at his partner, just finding simple happiness in his partner, while his partner just wants something bigger and better, like cities under crowns. So it's just, yeah, I got this simple kind of like layman's understanding of the poem so far, that it's just about an unreciprocated relationship, but one that seems to have been built up for quite a long time. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alicia. It's just firstly, welcome. And what happens is that each of the poems captures different slice of humanity and different slice of human experience.
Yeah.
And I thought you did a fantastic job of kind of speaking about the poem as well, because what happens is that there is a lot of, many of these poems are very deep. They're deceptively simple, but there's so much going on in it. And you kind of have to meander through the poem to get some things. And as you meander more and more, the poem has to be interesting, like a garden that is worth meandering in.
Yeah.
And then you walk through it, and at each walk, you get more and more and more. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next up is Faizan, followed by Margarita. Faizan.
Hi, thank you, Shrikant. So I'm a poet, and I guess, yeah, I was going to share something I'd written, although I'm trying to decide what might be a good fit for this group, but
You're welcome to, if you're debating between two poems, you're welcome to read both of them.
okay. Well, so I'll just read this one poem. It's called The United Host. They would ask us to name every layer of skin, of fat, fascia, vessel, sinew, muscle, nerve, and bone, to narrate that scalpel's sterile story as it penetrates you. Our tongues sharper than stained steel, precision hung off the galloping edge of life, suspended slow and taut as a tightrope of flat lines. One wrong word, and is that my pulse palpitating, or your blood mid-pounce at my iris? This is why we wear goggles and masks before we scrub ourselves thin, before we even enter the building. We don armor under our skin, no matter how numb it makes us. For the chinks in our knowledge, once probed, gape open like our pupils, and under the mercy of these self-appointed gods, we offer up a sacrifice of those long-buried feelings we didn't know we would miss. Empathy scooped out like tumors of idiopathic origin. As we trace your cartography of cardiovasculature, we feel hunted by moonlight as the silk threads close in, guided by gloved hope, to hook the mouth slashed open until end to end their donated veins kiss yours, anastomosed, fleeting, bartering blood, in a language whose guttural ebb and flow are enslaved to the song of your heartland, colonized by another, bound and saved by a stranger. These walls collide, cell by dividing cell, until the immigrant bumps into the citizen as if by accident. This might begin and end with handshakes and awkward hugs, or go up in flames. Let your drugged luck decide. Your bloodlines now crisscrossed and contaminated by a stranger's grace. Will you reject this lone gift, as your life depends on it? Pray intercellular peace as you flutter awake, slow and gentle as clouds drenched by indigo dawn, as the anesthesia evaporates from our doused minds, and every face of memory is diaspora scattered into full open bloom along the empty shores. Thank you, guys.
Wow. Faizan, I didn't know you could do this. This is amazing. This is amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was just amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I also love that painting behind him.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Wow. Thank you. All right, Margarita next. We will have opportunity of talking about this. So we got 3 sections. In this section, we are reading poems. Then we're going to go into breakout rooms. We got an exercise today in the breakout rooms. But when we come back, it's a much more free format, and we will figure out how to discuss about everything that we are experiencing today. Thank you. Next up is Margarita.
Would Faizan want to explain about the poem, or?
Faizan, it's up to you.
I mean, if you can ask me a question if you like, but I guess I'm not really, I like to let my poems speak for themselves.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Margarita.
Okay. So I just posted in the chat box. I will read a poem from Indonesian poet. His name is Sapardi Djoko Damono. It's quite famous from the book The Rain in June in 1989. So the setting is urban living, like going to a restaurant. The title is In the Restaurant. The two of us sit here. I ordered long weeds and grass flowers. I don't know what you ordered. I ordered a rock in the middle of a steep, heavy river. I don't know what you ordered. Yet we are alone, sit. I order for pain, which is unending and shrilling loudly. Order that strange feeling of hunger. That's a short poem about urban love, I think. Similar with Alicia, I think this is about one-sided love, where this person wants to have flowery, beautiful relationship, but he doesn't, or she doesn't know what the other want to be like strong, persistent, but perhaps this person could not get it from the partner. And yet this person decided to stay, even though he or she realized there will be unending and strange hunger within this relationship. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I think David wanted to say something about Faizan's poem. If anybody wants to talk about a poem, you're welcome to do that. David, you wanted to unmute. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to applaud. I wanted to acknowledge the work as something that was created an emotional reaction in me. You know, I wanted to applaud the genuineness that you brought to your work. And thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I second that. Sorry for if
Please,
I interrupted, but
please go ahead.
no, it was really, really good and moving, especially your descriptions. I am wondering if you have like a website that you post your poems on, or if you have just anything we could look at to read your poems as well after the meetup.
Uh, I can share my Instagram.
Okay, it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I have some poems published. So, well, yeah, I can try find a link. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. And what Maritza will do is that she will find this poem in Faizan's Instagram, and we'll put it so that it'll be there in our Scribble Hyperbook, so you can read it there as well. So we will have, but Faizan, if you could put your Instagram in the chat. All right, and Faizan, it's wonderful to have you back. Faizan is a regular at our New York in-person meetups. We've spent a lot of time together. He's a very good friend of mine, and it's just wonderful to have him here. So now we're going to go into the breakout rooms. And Maritza, could you describe what we're going to do in the breakout rooms? And I'm going to ask a volunteer, Margarita. I would like you to facilitate a breakout room. Would you be able to do that?
Okay, Sikin.
Okay, thank you. And so Maritza, if you could describe what we're trying to do in the breakout rooms.
Yes, I'm totally cheating and I don't trust myself to remember things. So I have a digital memory. This is what we're doing, guys. So what we're doing here today is I'm giving you a word image. The word image is courage. And I'm asking you to take courage, keep that foremost in your mind. As we go into the breakout rooms, we're going to do a group collaboration to create a 4 or 5 line poem, depending on how many people are in the breakout room. So we have 6 kind of like a word creative juice starters for you. Color, emotion, action, sound, shape, and place. So each person will select one of those and you'll spend a little time to come up with one line of like, you know, courage and color, you know, emotion and courage, what that brings for you. And then we'll, as a group in the small breakout room, we'll decide in which order to place the lines that folks have created. And then when we all come back, well, each little group will have a whole poem that we constructed on courage.
Wonderful. So does anybody have any questions about this assignment? So it's very simple. So there is courage, and there are these words about it, and we are going to make a poem. Each person gets to pick which word, which concept that you want to focus on, and write a line about that, and then we'll put it all together. The breakout rooms are going to be facilitated by, one is going to be facilitated by Maritza, and the second one is going to be facilitated by Margarita. And just go ahead. It'll be about, will about 20 minutes be fine, Maritza?
I think so. If we spend the first 5-10 minutes to let folks come up with their line, and then the last 10 minutes.
Sure. Okay, wonderful. So I'm starting the breakout rooms now. Faizan has put his Instagram in there. It's Doc Faizan. He's a doctor. So it's, as you would have guessed from the details of, you know, just he made that that, the body come alive at every level. Wonderful. Next, so I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. We'll be back here in 20 minutes, and then we will talk about something that we've all learned today, both from the breakout rooms and from the poems. And then we're going to talk about poetry in general. So starting the breakout rooms now.
Oh, I do have a question. Wait, ooh, can you guys hear me still?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So are we just writing one line?
That one, yeah, yes.
One line.
Okay, cool.
When you get to the breakout room, we'll discuss it again.
And yeah,
What it is.
facilitators will be there. They will help you.
Okay, sounds good.
So you can go ahead and select. I think you have to select to go to the breakout room.
Join breakout room.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. All right. So we're going to start with the results of the exercise. I'm going to hand it over to the facilitators of the breakout room to decide how they want to do that. And then I would like to talk to people about their poetry. I really want to talk to Faizan about not his poetry, but about poetry as such, about writing of poems. What is involved in writing of poems, or what is poetry? So just, and then anybody else who writes poetry, I would love to talk to them about that. So first, let me hand it over to Maritza. Maritza, go ahead.
All right. So, well, we learned that Maritza types terribly under pressure. Sorry to my team, my wonderful team. Despite me, Shrikant, they came up with something great. I'm going to read it for you. The dark gray of an 8th-story stone cliff withstanding the storms and battering waves. This painting of fire he must enter to save the lives he never knew. Courage, something petering out, a memory perhaps a hand rising above fists, holding rather than hating. An odd form, a tear really. Still, I act. I taste it in the morning, seems it's on my breath. I taste it in the evening, fear brings to mind my death. Hushed confessions in his lover's ear spoke of the shadow of silent sacrifice.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
How amazing is this group? I'm floored. That was amazing.
Wonderful. So let's have the other poem read, and then we can talk about both. Margarita.
Oh, this is interesting. Thank you, Shrikant, for letting me learn. So we started by expressing our feelings and sensation of courage. So this is expressive poem. So it's not yet structured well, but we try our best to speak about our feeling that we need to go to courage. We need to go beyond fear. That is, so before we go to courage, we need to embrace the fear and the pain. So I cry out for courage. Hopefully that's the title for now. Seeing red blood rises, the sweat of fear dripping down my face, go whirling through focused delirium. Courage scares the hell out of me. I cry out, battlefield rage, shocked at my own impetus, baffled by my instinct to love. Courage lets me allow that some things may be worth dying for and living for. Yet to struggle, to cry, to endeavor, to hurt, to give up, to burn, 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 burn. If courage can stop war, I would devote my life to find that courage. With the courage, I can live longer. With your courage, not only I'm listening, also I speak out. Courage allows us to overcome fear and makes life worth living. It will be in my time, not your time. I will spread my courage. However, will I ever have the courage to be myself? Yeah, that's the draft for now. Thank you guys from the group.
Wow, so Shrikant, everyone here is a poet.
Yes.
Amazing.
All right. Now, anybody who wants to share their experience of doing this exercise, you're welcome to do that. Go ahead and type ! if you'd like to speak about what it was like. I know some people have been writing poetry all their life. For many people, it is new. It's also a very special experience to see other people do it and actually talk to them as they're doing it. So we'll start with Alicia. Alicia, what was it like?
Ooh, there it is. Yeah, I did English literature in college and some creative writing, mostly creative nonfiction, which kind of involves some poetry, not really. But I've never really witnessed other people writing in real time. So that was really interesting to see. Um, and just, I guess, what else was it? Having a clear and yet very general prompt actually really inspired a lot of different ideas. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, it actually really helped me with writing. Usually I go way off prompt into a whole different subject. So I kind of liked how it was very clear, but also general. So it gave me options to like really go anywhere I wanted to go. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Let's see. So what we are going to do is that we're going to keep this structure. So this is our most interactive meetup of all the meetups that we do. So the first section is always people reading poems that they love, whether written by themselves or written by somebody else. The second one, the breakout rooms, Maritza and the people, and Allison and Margarita will keep coming up with ideas of what to do in the breakout room. So we'll be doing different things. And then the section at the end here, we kind of riff off everything that is happening and look at poetry in general. So today, if it's okay with you, Faizan, I'm going to ask you about poems, about poetry. You've been doing poetry for a long time. So what got you into poetry? What is poetry to you?
So okay, that's a big question, but I mean, so like I feel like well like I feel like we're all kind of exposed to poetry, from a from a very young age, like everything from like Dr. Seuss to like Shel Silverstein, and so like I think, yeah, like that must have been when I wrote my first poems. It was when I was like in second grade or something. But I didn't I think that I started to write I started to write poetry a little bit more, I guess, consistently, or I started writing it myself probably, yeah, in high school. And it started out like yeah, it started out mostly as like basically love poetry, which is probably how a lot of people start out, but it's definitely very much like some just like a very private thing, you know what I mean? But yeah, but then my relationship to poetry just started to kind of change as I studied it a lot more. And especially like when I was being exposed to like different the different schools of thought of like different kinds of poets, and like started to explore it more deeply, and in like English lit classes. So but like once I start to see so much more like about the possibilities of meaning that that existed in poetry in a way that was hard to find, like in a way that sometimes you can't really do in any other form. Yeah, like then I just started trying to, yeah, like that really changed how I approached poetry. And I started to, like try to explore those possibilities, through more abstract things, yeah, like thinking more about imagery and symbolism and metaphor. So I will say that probably the one thing that kind of like catalyzed, uh, like writing for me the most was in college when I would do, um, creative writing workshops. Yeah, so there are classes, where we studied poetry, studied the craft, but also, yeah, would have rounds of, bringing our work, sharing, sharing it, and basically like discussing it with a critical eye, and yeah, that to me was the most like, like it's hard to, you have to have like a good group, and really good like, facilitator to, to make the most out of those types of things, but yeah, like it definitely, that's kind of like opened up so many more things in the sense that, it helped me understand why and how, certain meanings or certain interpretations were being, taken, from things. So like, for me, like experimentation became like, the biggest, factor, that helped me just, basically, breaking out of like forms, and trying different things, different like, yeah, like this, different ideas and learning from, from both like contemporary poets and modern poets, and, just like all the different like eras and schools of poetry. So like I like to borrow from different, ideas and different like things. Yeah, but yeah, so, basically that, yeah, like it just kind of, like for me, I think on top of the workshops is really the other thing that really opened up poetry for me and like made it kind of more of a, more of a integral part of my life, was doing like, events, doing open mic nights, like they'd have weekly open mic nights even when I was in college, and so there's like a community around it, where people would share their favorite poems like this, and or, poems that they wrote, and yeah, just like kind of like making that a regular thing every week, like, it just kind of like it was like it created like this incredible like supportive, beautiful space, where we just shared in the love of, like all the possibilities and, and the resonance of words themselves, and like that kind of like made it, so like that was a constant source of like inspiration, like it gave me an outlet, and it kind of just kept me writing because I always wanted to, keep coming up with new material to take to the mic, and so, so that's something that I still do now, like I actually co-host an open mic now every week, on Tuesdays, and so, yeah, one of my favorite things is to see people come who've written for the first time or haven't performed before, and give them that space, the opportunity to like really, express something deeper, that they're able to access only through poetry. And so like finding the communion in the community, kind of elevates, kind of transcends the experience. It's not just a private individual thing. It becomes, it comes almost like a conversation, discussion, and like it becomes a form of therapy, in a way, like I feel like, yeah, both writing and sharing poetry and, having it validated, understood, or at least, appreciated and recognized, is, is very, very therapeutic.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's kind of.
Oh, thank you, Faizan. That was wonderful. I think there are a few points I got from it. I want to talk a little bit about that, but I want to encourage anybody else who writes poetry. I want to invite them to share what their experience has been about writing poetry, because what happens is that the first point I want to make 2 points. First is that in any art, when you actually start producing the art, you really understand the art. I am a very big fan. I don't like spectator sports. I like participatory sports. And moment you start participating, actually you learn to be a better spectator. More you can write, like I know that for singing for sure. Like moment you start singing, you start appreciating it a lot more because you know how it is put together. Like Leonardo da Vinci has this idea of learning how to see. The first time I looked at it, what do you mean learning how to see? I have eyes. No, you don't. The thing is that once you start actually drawing and painting, you begin to see things. You begin to really appreciate the visual field and how it interacts with your consciousness and your emotions and your mind at the same time. The same thing happens whenever you take the position of being a creator of any kind of art. The second point I want to make, and then we will go, I'm encouraging anybody who writes poetry to share. Second point I want to make is the point that Faizan is making about community. That's a huge point, because what happens is that it's kind of like adding a whole new dimension, because you are expressing something fully. You're expressing something fully, and then you're getting the response to it. And people will notice things, people will say things which you may not have gotten fully. So it just builds on itself and it gets to a new level. Wonderful. Thank you, Faizan. Margarita, what about you? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I would like to invite the member from my previous group, because this is also probably our unique time to build, to create together. So just like what you said, almost like singing, this is our song that we sing as a choir, guys. So please share about your feeling that, because for me, poem is like a mirror where you see parts of yourself, and we chip in to create this mirror about all of us, what we experience during our struggle to find courage. And even some people see love inside the courage. So yes, let's talk about that. And I believe Allison, DLG, Kevin can also share the experience, because these are like pieces of you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to say one thing, that this is open mic, by the way, the Monday, and this is weekly open mic. So please bring all your creations, anything that you love, anything that you make, it's always welcome. Next up is going to be David, followed by Allison. David.
You know my name, don't you? Okay. Maritza, I'd like to thank you for putting this together. It reminds me of a process that sometimes I would walk through with my friends, may they rest in peace. And we would write poems, and with no theme. There would be no theme, but the order would be the order of people. And someone would write one line, and then the next person would write a line that fit with that line. And so we'd write lines and lines and write them down. You'd have a little bit of time to think. And it is so much fun. It's really so much fun. And then when you read back what you have at the end of it, you're part of it, they're part of it, we're all part of it. And it's a wonderful experience. It's kind of non-directive, but it's directive. It really engages us. It can be like really funny. You know, it can be really heartfelt. I remember once a friend of mine, may he rest in peace, he wrote a line, and all of a sudden I raised my fist to heaven. And that was the end of his line. And then the next participant said, and I yelled, where are my fucking keys? and so like, there's a lot of room for expression. I wanted to express today about Ukraine, for example, and what the people are going through there, and in particular, what the lovers might be going through there. And that's worthy of acknowledgement. You know, I think poetry, it seeks to memorialize an emotion that I don't want to lose. You know, I want to capture that emotion and share it. Something like Ukraine it's an opportunity to feel for all of those who might be feeling numb. You know, okay, it's time to wake up to the history or smack me in the head and cause me to feel if I don't feel like it. So I could read something if you like, or not, one or the other.
Is it your poem?
No, it's a Spaniard, Octavio Paz.
All right.
You remember him?
I don't, but go ahead. How about that? Let's go ahead.
Okay, let me do this one for you. I was fumbling for it before and you couldn't find it, and I ran out of time, but I found it again. This is part of Sunstone. Sunstone is a very long work, and I'm going to read a small part of it. Sunstone is about the Mexican Aztec calendar, and it's pictured with all these different things carved in it, all these different events, but it's a calendar, but it's a catalog. Anyway, this is what he got out of it, okay? This was written during the Spanish-American War in the 30s, and what was happening in Madrid. You know, people were living there and they were getting bombed like they're getting bombed in Ukraine now. Here we go. We're whirling into this delirium. Madrid, 1937, on the Plaza de Angel, seeing the women doing their sewing and singing with their sons, and then the shriek of the siren and their shriek in houses brought down and crawling in the dust, the towers cloven, the faces running spittle, and the hurricane of engines. I hold static, two naked people loving one another. For the sake of defending our eternal portion, our rationing of time in the paradise, to touch our root, to reach ourselves in touching, to recover our inheritance pirated by robbers of life in 1,000 centuries. These two took their clothes off and they kissed because these nakedness woven together can overleap time and are invulnerable. Nothing can touch them. They go to the origins. There is no you, nor I, tomorrow, yesterday, names, only truth, to become only one body and soul. Oh, total being. To love is to struggle. And if two people kiss, the world is transformed and all desires made flesh, and intellect is made flesh. Great wings put forth their shoots from the shoulders of the slave. The world is real and to be touched, and the wine is wine, and bread can taste again. The water is water. To love is to struggle, is to open the doors, to stop being a fantasy with a number, condemned to the sentence of the endless chain by a faceless master. And the world is changed when two people look at each other, recognizing our names, allow me to be your horror. And these words of Heloise, but he gave in to the law. He took her to be his wife, and as reward later they castrated him. Better to have crime, the suicidal lovers, or the incest between two brothers, as between two mirrors falling in love and loving their reflections. Better to venture and eat the poisoned bread, better adultery on a bed of ashes, the ferocious passions and delirium, the venomous ivy and the sodomite who carries for his buttonhole carnation a goblet of spit. Better to be killed by stoning in the public square than tread the mill that grinds out into nothing the substance of our life, changes eternity into hollow hours, minutes into penitentiaries, and time into some copper pennies and abstract shit. Better take chastity, the invisible flower, swaying among the evening stalks of silence, the difficult diamond of the saints of heaven, which filters out the desires and satiates time, makes marriages of quietude and movement, sings the song of solitude, her corolla, a petal of crystal, she sings each hour. The world is stripping itself of all its mass, and at its center, vibrating, transparent, that being we call God, the nameless being, contemplative of itself in nothingness, the faceless being emerging from itself, son of sons, fullness of presences and names. I follow my delirium, rooms, streets. I walk groping and groping down the corridors of time and over and under staircases. I feel along its walls. I turn to where I began. I see your face. And under the timeless sun, you beside me, walk with me like a tree, a river going, walk with me, speaking to me like a river, grow like a stalk of wheat among my fingers, throb like a squirrel warm among my fingers, flying become 1,000 birds. Your smiling has covered my body with sea foam. Your head is a nebula and small between my hands. The world grows fresh and green while you are smiling and eating an orange. And the world has changed. And so it goes on. That's about 2% of this whirling delirium. It just, it takes you on a wild ride like a roller coaster. This wild emotional ride of images. And I think what this piece does for me is it goes into the subconscious and it follows these different tributaries, and it goes, doesn't just follow, it exit by a tributary and then joins another river and then it flows together again. And I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, David. Next up is Allison, followed by Maritza and Joe. Allison.
I hadn't raised my hand.
Oh, you said, oh my, exclamation mark. I read only exclamation marks.
Damn, Jeff.
Sorry.
Said very funny. And I did this last week. I thought I was replying to him and it went to everyone. And it's his fault. He was making jokes about the poem and the bunker. It's his fault. I don't know what else I had to say. That was
okay. That's fine. That's fine. Next up is Maritza, followed by Joe. Maritza.
I think the two groups went about the process of bringing together the poems differently. And I'm fascinated. So with our group, we did everyone in the first 10 minutes, they communed with themselves and came up with a line. So they each got one of the themes and they came up with one sentence or one line, for the poem. And, time is never your friend. So we put it on, and I have, at the end of the 10 minutes, I put a screen up and I'm typing. Everyone's giving me their sentences. I think I'm a fairly fast typer, but I guess I don't type well under pressure. So, they're unfortunately dealing with my mistakes and my lack of hearing them correctly. And they're really kind to me. But I was so busy trying to get their lines correct that when I had the last one and we had like maybe 2 minutes and I looked at what we had there, it was such a shock. And the shock, it's a good shock. I'm still smiling, Shrikant, I looked at it and I was like, because before I saw, I was like, oh, we're never going to be able to make this into a poem. It had already made itself into a poem. We literally moved like maybe one line. I put each line with a space between it. And we moved maybe one because they selected themselves in what order they would say, oh, I want to go next. And they gave me their line. And I think it was done, well, correct me if I'm wrong. You know, when they heard the previous line, they're like, oh, my line will go here. And so it was just fascinating. It was really, it's almost like crazy that, you know, it's so cohesive and so it seems like it was all done perfectly in tandem, but, you know, everyone was in their own corner initially. So I think that that's a really, really cool aspect. And, you know, so I mentioned Sushikant for those of you who may have or may have not participated in some of our discussions on some of the virtues. I chose courage. I'm cheating a little bit, right? Because it's a topic that we've been studying and I wanted to study a little more. And so I was like, well, let's put courage as the central focus for our collaborative poem, because if you ask somebody, what does courage mean to you? They're going to stop and think about it, and you'll get a well thought out response, perhaps. If they're writing a poem with that as the focus, we'll get something a little deeper that they themselves may not realize about themselves. And, you know, I told you guys at the beginning of this series that I was going to fall in love with all of you just a little bit, because it would be impossible to not do so if you were sharing your poetry with me. And so today I fell in love a little more. And the thing about poetry to me, you know, and I have walked with poetry for so much of my life, it's been a soothing balm, which it's always been really, you know, kind of strange to me, since so much of the rational has also called out to me, but the poetry has been kind of the nice counterbalance for me. I have seen that whenever someone reads a poem, even if it's not theirs, there is a truth about them that comes forth, whether they realize it or not. And, you know, in that way, poetry has a way of just making everyone shine, and they all shine in different ways. And here, I really love that we're exploring not just to see each other shine, but to help each other, or to see, maybe not help, but it is, you know, like subconsciously, we're solidifying different concepts within us here. Like, this is the start of it. I really do look forward to doing more things kind of similarly like this. And I love the syntopic manner in which this flows, because there's so much food here and fodder in these two poems that we created. When you look at what does the average person envision deep within themselves when we think about courage, and you have, you know, focused delirium, a tear, a hand rising above fists, you know, this is, you know, battle rage. I think it's fascinating, all of these images that have come from within all of you. I think it's cool. The only other thing that I feel paints such an emotional image of our inner selves is dancing. I would equate that to doing the same thing. It's one of those things where when you get really involved in it, unintentionally, or maybe unbeknownst to you, you're leaking little inner bits of yourself. And there's no way to stop that. That's just inevitable because of the form. And so I that's how I view just poetry in general. And it's something really special here that I think we're doing, Shrikant. And I'm really excited.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to do three things now. Firstly, I'm going to ask Margarita what the experience, what the process was, what was it like in her breakout rooms. Second, I want to point out that we have this, what we are building like a scribal hyperbook, where we put up these videos and links to all the poems themselves. Now, these new poems we are going to put on the page over there that Joe has just put in, and you're welcome to use the comments there in order to add things, add your favorite poems, anything that you want. And we will keep incorporating that into the page. So the conversation continues from the oral to written and back, and it'll keep producing a richer and richer page there for all of us to enjoy. So it's going to be, so Margarita, what was it like? What was the process like in your breakout room? How did it come together? I have to notice that. And then finally, after this, I'm going to raise the question of now in prose, what is the relationship between being a poet and courage? What is the relationship between courage and producing poetry? Margarita, what was it like in your breakout room?
Okay, so it was a new thing for me to lead, because usually, because we're in different time zones, it's a bit difficult for me to follow all your meetings, even though it's really great, but I don't really understand how it works. So, but I feel secure because Joe and Alison is there, and many people also. So we were exploring first. I feel the task.
No, Margarita, I cheated. I like to throw people in the water, but I like to put, I put Joe there to make sure. And then when Alison showed up, I put Alison there. So you have a lot of people around you who can help you. But it's important to jump into the water and start swimming. So go ahead.
This is my first time to be involved like this. Thank you. Anyway, I'm learning. So, because I think this task is for us to embody, like remember how it felt to be courageous. So that's what we share. The first time is like ice breaking, just free explore about how it felt, taste, feel like, emotion like, everything. So we have 1 minute to do that, and then people start to write down their tags, and seeing other people start to writing down their tags, people start to jump in, and we collect them and make it into one draft. And I share it again, and I ask people to say how they feel about this draft. What are the key topics there? Because this is a shared experience. This is not just one person writing the narrative, but a collective narrative about how it felt to be courageous. So I think what's interesting is people start to say things like, before courageous come, I feel the fear, I feel the pain. So that starts to be our topic, how we process from experiencing fear, finding a conflict when we are pushed into developing, into knowing and thriving with courage. However, there will be also some kind of, not pessimism, this agony, even after experiencing courage. So that's what we try to portray. Of course, time is limited. We try to make it into structure, editing, and I believe editing will continuously come. It's okay. But I'm glad that this is a time to facilitate us into creating together, sharing our experience as human beings in order to cry out for courage. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So it's interesting because one of the things that I often think about is this, is the idea of spontaneous order. And in general, how spontaneous order mostly fits. I always think about it within classical terms, like more of an economic terms, but it applies to biology, it applies to physics, it applies to everything. And what emerges from chaos is actually, it's interesting because that's kind of what you're seeing here, is what emerges is something better than maybe something that if you had planned something out. So one another writing exercise that Shrikant, you had us do was the 5 minute, just get your thoughts down on paper and see what comes out, and then try and connect those thoughts. And that's something that you're just letting go. It's not planned, it's not organized, but there's a certain order that exists, that emerges from it. And I think this could be a very powerful tool sometimes. And I actually haven't done that exercise for a while. And it's a powerful tool, because if you try and plan something, if you try and go really deep as to thinking, what you could really get lost in your head, and philosophically speaking, about courage, because it is such a deep topic. But if you just say what comes out and then see what emerges out of that, then it's kind of you're iterating, and you're creating something then better than you've ever could have actually planned. So it's a very interesting process in and of itself. Now, the link between courage and poetry is also, that's a great question to ask, because
excellent. Let's do that. Let's do that. So go ahead. Shall I go ahead and introduce the question?
Yeah, go ahead and introduce the question.
All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to do in prose what we did in poetry. What is the relationship between courage and poetry? I'm going to put something on the table, and then go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to add your own comments. This is a version of doing the same thing that we did in the breakout room, but now in prose, of trying to grapple with courage and poetry and the connection between them. Okay. My favorite example of that is Louis Sullivan's book, Kindergarten Chat, where he's teaching the student how to be a designer. And at one point he says, you must be a poet. So the student looks at him as if he was crazy. I said, what do you mean? I've come here to learn architecture. What are you saying? You have to be a poet. He says, what you need to do is you need to let the life break in upon you and then break out. That, and do that on a continual basis, where you are drinking in life, taking in everything about it. Listen to every delicate rhythm, the most powerful movements, the hurricanes, everything, the positive, the negative, all the variations. Take all of that in. Be open to everything. And then express it. Learn to express your words. Everything that you do has to match the grandeur of life that you're taking in. In that, you're being a poet. You're trying to say, what is the nature of this life? How can I add something to it that actually captures its nature in the most powerful way, the most delicate way, the most inspiring way, the most efficient way I possibly can? And that is what it means to actually make something, to create something, regardless of whether you are doing dance or architecture or software design or running a business. Anything that you're doing, bring that, be a poet. This is because man is a poet. Man is a poet. Just like in the design way, we say man is a designer. Saying that man is a poet is actually a slightly higher version. He's saying, don't just design for practical things. Imagine the greatest thing possible and bring that into existence. Bring the divine into existence. Bring the divine into the world. That's what poetry is all about. And that requires courage. It requires courage to firstly be open to life. Second, it requires courage to speak. It requires courage to notice when it is not good enough. All the greatest artists are their best critics. They look at it and say, not quite. And keep improving, keep improving. The art that I'm most familiar with is Indian classical music. And the greatest musicians at the age of 80, considered by everybody to be the best by far, will always say, I'm still learning. I can't quite fully express this rag, this emotion. I'm still, every time I start to sing, the other thing is that it is all in the present. It doesn't matter what you have done in the past. In the present, you're going to go beyond what you have ever done before. And that desire comes from within. It is spiritual. It is universal. And such people actually add, it requires social courage. Because when you see something, all the great artists typically see something which their time hasn't fully grasped. It is there at the edge of the consciousness to be grasped, but the great artists capture it, make it concrete, make it a moving piece. And they are the harbingers of the next thing, where the culture needs to go. Again, that requires tremendous intellectual courage, emotional courage, social courage. So to me, being a poet and being courageous are synonymous. Next up is Allison. Allison, go ahead. Folks, would like to hear what you have to say about courage and poetry. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to share your thoughts. Allison.
I think that it's very courageous to write a poem or to write poetry, or really to create any art, because you're sharing your emotions with the reader or with the audience. And it's much easier to write nonfiction because you're just writing about facts and you can kind of hide within them. But with poetry and I mean, the art I know the best is dance. It's, like you're taking everything that's in your soul and you're putting it out there for public consumption. And that's pretty scary, because you don't know how people are going to react to it, or if it's too much or too little. And that's hard. But it does make you feel it makes you feel so alive. So, it's very different kind of courage than like we were, writing about war poetry, that's a different kind of a courage. But to make your emotions and your heart and your feelings and show them to the world, that's a very courageous act in and of itself in a different way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Next up is Joe.
I liked how you linked it to being open. That's kind of critical, is that because that's one of the most important things when you're talking about courage, is essentially that you're willing to challenge your own thoughts and beliefs. And poetry is one way of putting your thoughts down on paper. And as Allison had mentioned, had already seen, that you're making yourself vulnerable in this process. So you're essentially bearing your soul to the world if you're sharing it. This is, why Dr. Faizan is, it's a powerful thing. It's an act of courage to do that. And here's the thing though, in order to do that, you have to be okay with yourself. And that means that you've confronted whatever fear that you may have had in sharing whatever you're going to share with the rest of the world. You're comfortable enough with yourself because you confronted any dragons, so to speak. So then you're bearing your soul and you're okay with the result. You're indifferent to the outcome. I mean, people could say something about it. I'm sure that, maybe it may be hurtful, may or may not. but you're taking the step and putting yourself out there. And that is a tremendous accomplishment, because if you think about this, this is essentially, it's the same thing that if you were to have a relationship with somebody, it's the same exact process. You have to be okay. You're going to be authentic and you're going to be yourself with someone else. And that means you have to confront your innermost demons and be okay with who you are. And then to put those thoughts and feelings and down on paper and to share them with everyone else. That's really, that is courage, and it's utmost. So I think that there's a strong link there.
Thank you. The way, I mean, if you'll permit me to use metaphors, and you can object to it. Let's see. Yeah, give me, I'll just make one comment and then it'll be Ronald followed by Steve. Courage is like letting, Ronald, I'm going to mute you for a second. There is a feedback and then I'm going to let you speak. Courage is like making the bluebird in you an eagle and letting it go out and fly up and go everywhere and then come back to your soul and become the bluebird again. So this transformation from at a very deep level, like we are studying Bhagavad Gita, the core of your being actually is incredibly strong and incredibly steady. And that power is within each of us. It's the God in us, which is this kind of source of everything. So that's what I would say. Next up is going to be Ronald, followed by Steve. Ronald, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Ronald, you need to unmute yourself.
I was saying that I appreciate everyone's point of view, that it's very interesting. In my way of looking at it, poetry is really a linguistic issue. So pushing language in directions or forming relationships through language with reality. So let's say you stop at a stop sign and you sit there and you write a poem about a stop sign and all the things in your life that you had to stop doing, because that stop sign reminds you of everything that you remember your mother telling you to stop crying. You remember your father telling you to stop being a baby. And it sort of generates a whole system of thinking that's not empirically with that moment, because it's all happening within your own individual mind. And every person who stops at that stop sign will have a different list of stop issues in their lives. Stop falling in love, it'll just break your heart. Stop buying things because you're just going to lose them. You know, you can make a whole inventory of all the things in life that should be stopped. And I think that's what poetry is. I think it makes you see relationships between or among various things that are not usually customarily put together on the same page or in the mind.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ronald. Next up is Steve. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think we remember that the word courage comes from the old French word heart. So to reveal your heart to others, your feelings, your passions. And I think as Joe said, the key word to me is vulnerability. To be vulnerable to another human being takes a lot of courage.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Folks, this is just incredible. I think these poetry meetups are acquiring a life of its own, a life of their own. And so I encourage everybody to share more, come up with more ideas. Maritza, Margarita and Allison are going to be the facilitators in the breakout rooms. So you can communicate amongst yourself and come up with different ideas every time for the breakout rooms. And at the end, we will do, so the structure will always remain the same. It'll be three-part structure. The first, everybody gets to share the poems that they love. Second, the breakout rooms, let us try to do, Marissa, what do you think? I thought this idea of doing this some kind of exercise together, collaborative exercise together, was a very, very good idea. And I think that's something that is really special that we can do here. What do you think?
Absolutely, I agree 1000%. This same exercise with maybe a different focus might be something to do. It might be fun to do, to keep piggybacking off of other topics. Like, so if we discuss another virtue, throw that in as the focus thought there.
But we can keep coming up with many, many different kind of collaborative things that we can do in the breakout rooms. So that'll be that kind of collaborative part. And then when we come back, we always share our experiences in the breakout rooms or about the poems, and then talk about poetry and life in general. That's the overall format. But it's a flexible enough format to let each person bring whatever it is that they can come up with to the table, both, in the poems that they read, maybe come up with new ideas in the breakout rooms. So we will keep doing this. Thank you very much, everybody. This is really, really special. We'll see you soon. Bye. And special thanks to Faizan. Faizan, that was just amazing, amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate you holding the space, Shrikant.
Thank you. Bye.